What is going on, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Unreasonable Odds podcast. We are recording on Wednesday, August 3rd. Happy 45th birthday to Tom Brady. Said he'd play till 45, play until 45. Here we are. We got a lot to go over later in the show in just a few minutes. As promised, Adam Levitan from Establish the Run is going to join me. We're going to talk, the NFL market on DraftKings Sportsbook. His niche, his bread and butter there, the season-long player props that are out on DK Sportsbook. We have over 300 of them to choose from, so we should have plenty to talk about, even with some line movement there. DFS Week 1 salaries are live on DraftKings.com, so we can talk that Week 1 NFL slate for Sunday, September 11th. Plenty of NFL to talk about with Levitan when he joins the pod, but just a few housekeeping things first to go over. Number one, how about the news in Massachusetts? Legalized sports betting will be on the way, DraftKings home state. So that is very exciting. I don't have any specific knowledge at the moment, but that is going to be very fun for us at DraftKings and probably create some new content and opportunities that we can work with. So we're really looking forward to that. And speaking of opportunities, I would say the menu at DraftKings Sportsbook right now for betting football gives you more opportunity than anywhere else in the sports betting space right now. So I just wanted to promote a couple of things that we got going on. Number one, alternate win totals did go up for college football. We recorded that podcast with Phil Steele. It's just short of an hour long. If you haven't listened to it yet and you're doing your college football research, you're going to want to go back and listen to that one. Phil came on and as usual, just berated us with a wealth of college football knowledge. Two of the teams that he's really high on, his number one surprise team, Pitt, and his number three surprise team, ACC, in the ACC, NC State, are two teams that I happen to be very high on, two teams that I bet the win total overs on, and we now did get their alternate win totals posted to DraftKings Sportsbook. So if you want NC State over 9.5 games, get them to double digits. We got that at plus 170. If you want Pitt over 9.5 games, go double digits there to 10. We got that up at, I think, plus 230. So both of those pretty big plus money in the alternate college win total segment or tab on DK Sportsbook. And we got those up specifically because of the Unreasonable Odds podcast. So go bet those if you are a fan of those plays like I am. I'll probably write something up on them shortly. Another market that by the time you're listening to this, you will probably see my article out on. If you go to football on DK Sportsbook, we have our NFL preseason, college, CFL, like we always do. There's now an NFL NCAA football specials tab. If you click on that tab, and we're getting more and more states popping this up now, it is head-to-head win totals or head-to-head who has more wins between 26 different NFL and college football teams. So and they try and keep them as local as possible. So for example, Tennessee Titans minus 220 versus the Tennessee Vols plus 180. Who wins more games this season? Now the catch here, of course, is that college teams play 12 games and NFL teams play 17 games. So anytime you're taking the NFL team, you're getting more opportunities. You know that. But it's an interesting market. You got another one if you want a college side maybe to go with. FSU and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Pick them, minus 115 each way. Both are set at 6.5 on DK Sportsbook. I think the Jags always have a pretty low floor. They've had the number one pick in consecutive drafts, and FSU could be a team on the up in the ACC. So there's an example of one to look at. But 26 of them posted on DK Sportsbook. I would recommend taking a look at those. And one other little thing, I'm going to write an article on this, but I'll point it out early if you're a listener so that you can maybe take advantage of this. I don't know how long this will be offered on DK Sportsbook. If you go to the team futures and you go to the playoff parlays, like if you're going to parlay teams to make or miss the NFL playoffs, you can't do that on DK Sportsbook. But in this playoff parlays tab, you can. So for example, the heaviest chalk, the heaviest favorites would be the Bills and Bucks to both make the playoffs, which is minus 250. Now, the catch here is that this can be parlayed with something from the college football market, say, whereas stuff in the college football market like win totals, conference winners, division winners can be parlayed, but you can't parlay those together on the college side. So if you take something from NFL and college, for example, you can put them together. So the Bills and Bucks to both make the playoffs at minus 250 can be parlayed. The Alabama win total is 10.5. It's been bet up from minus 190 to minus 280. That's probably not something you're going to bet on its own right now. But if you want to take Bama over 10.5 wins, means they have to, I think they'll go perfect 12-0, but it gives you a chance to slip up and win 11 games there. You can parlay that with two extremely chalky pieces in the Bills and Bucks to make the playoffs. Now those three outcomes combined parlay out to a minus 111. So you're getting pretty standard minus 110 juice there. And that's not something that you can bet on any other sports book in the world as far as I'm concerned. So pretty cool parlay ability right now when it comes to the football futures market on DraftKings Sportsbook. Hopefully, out of all those, the alternate win totals, the NFL college head-to-head wins, and being able to parlay something like that, that inspires you guys to go in there and come up with something of your own. But that's enough rambling from me. Without further ado, we are going to talk to Adam Levitan next from Establish the Run and get into some NFL futures, some NFL player props, and some DFS. It is time for football, ladies and gentlemen. Alrighty, welcome back into the Unreasonable Odds podcast. Julian Edlow from DraftKings here, and as promised, we are joined by Adam Levitan from Establish the Run, old friend here at DraftKings. Levy, how we doing, man?
Good, man. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We love to talk with you this time of year because it means that football is right around the corner. Recording on Wednesday, August 3rd. Probably get this out on Thursday the 4th, which means there's a football game that night, an NFL football game, the Hall of Fame game. I'm sure it will be a barn burner. 30.5, I think, was the total last I looked. But we don't need to focus on that because nobody knows what's going to happen in the Hall of Fame game. But we might know what's going to happen in the NFL season this year, or at least try to predict some of it. We have the Cheesecake Factory style menu of season-long player props going on the DraftKings Sportsbook. I know they've moved all over the place since opening, and you and your coworkers and your following at Establish the Run have bet a lot of these and moved them along. But we can just kind of go over some of the things that you guys have bet over there, as well as some of the names that pop out to me, and I'll throw them at you, and you can let me know where you're at projection-wise and kind of get a feel for this season-long player prop market. But before we start throwing names out there, we were talking right before we started recording the podcast, and I said, let's just stop talking and make this the start of the podcast, because these player prop numbers can be funny because, you know, a win total is a win total, a division winner is a division winner. Player props, when you play it for the game and a guy gets hurt, you're always like, oh, bad beat, what are the odds of him getting hurt today? But guys get dinged up. Guys miss games, particularly these running backs and receivers. And you said to me that last year you thought that the prop market was ridiculous because it was definitely accounting for these 17 games. And it's come back to what you would expected a little bit more this year, although I'm sure we're going to talk about many more unders than overs. But do you want to just expand on that a little bit, what we were talking about?
Yeah, I think last year, I mean, clearly the books are using a model, projection model similar to what we are. I obviously think that ours is way better, but they were using a model clearly to make their season-long lines from last year, and they just posted what they spit out for 17-game seasons, and that's okay right. For fantasy. We typically have a 17-game assumptions for our guys, unless they have some injury label associated with them. But when you're setting a prop line, you really can't and shouldn't do that. And so we really went to town last year. I think we went 31-3 last year in season-long props, which obviously was unsustainable, but I think it reflected how bad the odds were. This year, I expect to be way, way, way worse, our record in season-long, because, they just clearly lopped off a couple games. And so all you have to do really is take a 15-game projection or a 14-game projection and then go from there. And also, clearly, lines are moving very much based on what we take. I know sometimes you guys post here's the most bet player props of the day or whatever. Here's the most, and it's always the stuff that we take. And so I think it's important for us
sign of a good business on your end.
Yeah. Well, I my point was more that I think that it's important to show them that we're willing to take overs. So we've tried to mix in some overs that I've been uncomfortable with this year, just in an effort to be listen, if you guys go too low, if you start hacking it to 12-game seasons or 11-game seasons or 13-game seasons, on certain guys we're going to be at least willing to take an over, just to try to keep them honest on the lines. And so, yeah, it's a bit inside baseball, just a battle, I think, between us and the quote unquote traders or whoever you guys got in your basement there, Julian.
Not me. I'm way too dumb to do any of this, but we do have guys, and they're called traders, and they do this, and they come up with these numbers. If I was coming up with them, you would have gone 34-0 last year instead of 31-3. um, let me put you on the spot, I guess, real quick. Let me know if this applies to anyone, but like you used that example of, if you go down to maybe a 12-game sample on a guy that you don't think has too poor of an injury history, we're willing to take an over. Do you have like an example of somebody that you maybe did that for so far this season?
Yeah, I mean, we've taken a few overs. I would say like one that comes to mind that I thought was good was the Saquon Barkley over 825 and a half rushing yards.
Yep.
You know, Saquon another year removed from the ACL, but like his competition for carries is so light, and like a true 3 down back with talent in a Brian Dable offense, it's just running back overs are never going to feel good. So, that was one where I
And
was
he's
like,
he's currently up to 900 on DK.
yeah, I would not take that at 900, and like, I really encourage people to be sensitive about what the price and what the line is they're getting. But anyways, on Saquon, yeah, like running back overs are not going to feel good, but I felt like a player of Saquon Barkley's caliber, like stars, I think you can do it with. And Steph Diggs, we took over 1,100 and a half. Travis Etienne, we took over on his rushing yards as well, over 650 and a half on DraftKings. That was back on July 1st. I don't feel great about any of those, but it's something where we had major gaps. We had like 300-yard gaps in our projection, 400-yard gaps in our projection. And like, if you're going to pass on that stuff, you're going to end up with 0 overs. And like I said, I just don't think that's a good idea for us long term.
Okay. Talk to me about the Diggs and Barkley. I agree. I see your case there. Those are primetime players that if they stay healthy, they're going to clear those numbers, and that's really what it comes down to, I would say. ETN we haven't seen yet. He missed his entire rookie year due to injury. You have James Robinson back in that backfield and coming back. He's one of these guys now that does the Achilles, and people are coming back at these superhuman rates, just like the ACL used to be. And he's going to be a part of that backfield. You guys took it at 650. It's at 705 now on DK, so it went up 55 yards from that.
Yeah,
I've played a couple of unders so far. I'm pretty late to the party. I'm going to see what's still out there. But one of the unders that I played was Travis Etienne rushing and receiving combo at 1025. Even money on the under there. He's familiar with Trevor Lawrence. They used a first-round pick on a running back, which means you kind of have to feature him to prove your value there, even though the coaching tree has turned over since then. So who knows what they think of ETN. Tell me what went into that one, and he's coming off a tough foot injury, which maybe puts a little bit of a red flag for me there, even though he was a bit of a workhorse at Clemson. Sometimes those guys that are 4 years and get 1 million carries in college, when they get to the NFL, they can start to break down a little bit, and they already have those miles on their legs. Talk to me about what went into the ETN prop.
Yeah, honestly, I probably wouldn't take this one if I could go back. This was before we took this on July 1st. It was before the James Robinson news came out, and we had assumption on James Robinson missing most of the season. Now, obviously, we have an assumption on James Robinson playing the season, although I'm still skeptical, man. Like, I know that Cam Akers came back. I know the guys
really
are coming back. It would not shock me at all if A, James Robinson is not actually ready for week 1. B, he's not good and they don't play him. C, he aggravates. Like, there's a lot of ways for it to go bad for James Robinson. Of course, Travis Etienne's coming off of Liz Frank as well, and Liz Frank also, which is serious. So, yeah, these running back overs are never going to feel good. I just think 650 and a half when we thought Robinson wasn't going to play when he was battling for carries like Snoop Connor, a 5th-round rookie. Well, we had major gap there, because even if you only give him 150, 200 carries, he's still really, really likely to get there on that. So, yeah, probably one that I would take back at this point. Definitely wouldn't take it at 700 and a half with the James Robinson news, but yeah, maybe we can get lucky and in the process keep them honest a little bit.
That works. All right, the rest of everything that I see on your plays are unders. Before we talk any specific players and their unders, assuming the majority of these have moved, probably all of them since you've bet them,
Yeah.
are there what percentage of your plays, if any, would you say you're going to come back on at that lower number, and try and middle any of these, or are these plays all to just let ride? You're comfortable with the number, you're comfortable with projection, you're letting it go.
Yeah, I get asked this question all the time. I think that if I only take bets I consider to be plus EV, right? So
Yep.
if the number moves enough where I think the over is plus EV now, like we moved the number 200 yards and now the over is plus EV, I would take it. But man, it would be really hard for these guys that we had big unders on or sizable unders on. They would have to move it so much for me to think that an over was plus EV. So I won't be taking it. If you have
Okay.
a smaller bankroll and maybe you bet too much on the first side of it and you want to go for a 100-yard middle or something like that, I certainly wouldn't kill you. But I think in the long run, we just want to be making plus EV bets over and over and over and over again. And so I don't typically hedge anything. I never use the cash out button. I wouldn't recommend anyone use the cash out button. Sorry, DraftKings. And yeah, no hedging. Unless it's also plus EV. So yeah, but there are bankroll considerations, like you get into these spots where let's say you had like 16-1 or something on the Celtics to win the finals. And then you get there and it's this huge portion of your net worth. Like even if it's negative EV to take Warriors series price there, you might still want to do it because of bankroll considerations. So it's kind of a complicated question if you're following what I'm saying.
It is, and that's also, I mean, they're also different bets because with the player props, you're still opening up a window to
To
move
middle.
both, but
Yeah.
you're also playing, minus 110s, minus 120s. Whereas if you have a Celtics plus whatever, plus 2,000 to win the title, and you're betting the Warriors, well, there is no middle. You can't win both, but you're also counting on a 20-1 ticket. None of these we're not playing
Yeah.
offensive rookie of the years 20-1. We're playing stuff that's juiced pretty evenly on both sides. So it is different, and I agree with you. I'm a company man, but I'm not cashing out any of my bets. You don't see me using that. I tell people that I'm letting them ride. That's why I bet it in the first place, and we're gonna see what happens. So let's move on to some unders here in the player prop market. I'm just gonna start where you started, which is all the way back on May 25th, and you didn't bet anything until June 1st from then. So this one jumped out to you immediately. It was on DK, and it was Jahan Dotson under 709.5 receiving yards on DraftKings.
Yeah, all the books open the rookies first, and they've done this a few years in a
Yep.
row where like they just right after the draft, people are excited about the draft, they're excited about the prospects. I guess they feel a need to get those out before the veterans, and so the first stuff up was all of the rookie stuff. And yeah, you're asking a lot for rookie receivers to step right in and go for 800 yards. Like it's like way harder than people think for that. And also, John Dotson has serious competition. I think Curtis Samuel's going to be healthy. Obviously, Terry McLaurin's going to command a large share of targets, and Carson Wentz to me is just like, they're going to try to play not
Nope.
to lose with Carson Wentz. And so, yeah, I mean, Jahan Dotson, that line was just wrong. We took Christian Watson under, we took Treylon Burks under also in the subsequent days. And so, yeah, the rookie stuff, I think easy unders on when they open up even close to too high.
So I'm gonna pull some of those guys up now on their current numbers on DraftKings. If you do you want to check those rookies out? I don't know how far they've moved, but like what numbers you would be comfortable betting the rookies down to, because I do think those guys are pretty interesting. Given that we've never seen them in the NFL and their roles can still be up in the air, we might learn more about them in preseason now coming up. And their production can just be up in the air. There's got to be some time for them to catch on. So where am I at right now? I'm
Yeah,
going to go over to the receiving yards.
we
Go
have
ahead.
679.1 receiving yards for Jahan Dotson, and that's assuming that he plays the full 17 games. We have Curtis Samuel 510
Oh, wow.
and Terry McLaurin for 1,044. So yeah, we're making assumption that part of baked in is like Jahan Dotson is good because he was drafted in round one, right? Like the model knows that Jahan Dotson was drafted in round one. What if Washington made a mistake and Jahan Dotson actually isn't that good, right? And then like we're over projecting. So like to me, we're kind of projecting Jahan Dotson at the top of his range here. or some level at the top of his range with stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, the Christian Watson stuff also another reason for unders. Obviously, like we took Christian Watson under, and now he had knee surgery, and like he's missing most of camp.
Right.
So like stuff like all that stuff is obviously advantageous to unders, and that's why they're so successful.
Christian Watson obviously off the board. I should have presented that information before bringing his name up. Jahan Dotson, you guys probably moved him about 100 yards, which is tough to do on a guy that opens 700 yards. He's sitting 6'11 and a half
Yeah.
on DK Sportsbook. So that's too much of a chunk there to move down to suggest anything.
Yeah, we have
Treylon Burks. Well, yeah, Treylon Burks pretty significant chunk too. What is that? 70 or so yards. He's 795 and a half.
Yeah, and we
Right.
actually show, I wouldn't bet it, but we do show over on him. We have 844 right now on Treylon Burks,
Okay.
and so like that's not a big enough gap for me to bet an over. But like you can see how it works out for Treylon Burks this year. Like, I mean, if he's actually good, they have like no one else to throw to, and if they get behind, Tannehill stays in games. They don't go to Malik Willis, but they get behind in a lot of games. You can see it going well for Treylon Burks. So that's one that I'm most worried about. The Dotson and Christian Watson unders, I think, are pretty good.
Talk to me about the thought process, because I think this scares a lot of casual bettors just with the eye test of fading some of the most elite running backs, the most elite fantasy plays in the game, and doing what you did, which is taking an under 1,500 yards on Derrick Henry. It says on the document you sent me, Derrick Henry under 1,500 receiving yards. I
Sorry.
definitely like that play, and I'm going to guess that it is supposed to be rushing yards.
Good catch.
And then along the same lines, a Jonathan Taylor who scored 1 million touchdowns last year, under 14 and a half rushing touchdowns. Talk to me about the process that goes into fading two guys that were, Henry got hurt last year, so there's your script where he's just not going to get there. But
Yeah.
two guys that when they are on the field are guys that are always going to produce, always going to have the ball in their hands.
We had Derrick Henry under last year. I almost chalked it up as a loss because he was getting like literally like 150 rushing yards a game until he got hurt. I mean, that was definitely going to be a loser, but star players tend to be inflated by books and the market and the public, right? So, nobody wants to bet under on Steph Curry. No one wants to bet under on Alex Ovechkin or whatever. No one wants to bet under on Derrick Henry or Jonathan Taylor. And so you get inflated lines. I mean, to set a guy's line for rushing yards at 1,500 and a half, you're essentially saying that he's going to basically get almost 100 rushing yards every game for the entire season. And like, that's just really, really hard to do. So
what number, let me ask you this in there. Like, what number you said that you felt books took a couple games off this year as an adjustment? Is that what you see in 1,500 yards for Henry, 14 and a half touchdowns for Taylor? Like, you see that as 15 game type of projection from them?
Oh, I mean, to me, that's like 17 game production if you're being realistic.
That's what I was going to say. It feels like it's playing the whole season.
Yeah, we have Derrick Henry for 1,494 yards, rushing yards, which is just like, that's a massive number.
If he were to play the 17,
and that assumes he's going to play the full season. Yeah. And so, like, obviously, like, he's really likely to miss a game or two along the way there. And so, yeah, it's just on some of those games, on some of those plays, it just gets so inflated on the stars. The Jonathan Taylor one, I mean, Colts last year were fourth in time possession. They were winning so often, a lot of close games, but most importantly, they just like happened to land inside the 10-yard line and inside the 5-yard line so often. I think Jonathan Taylor set like a 10-year record for most carries from inside the 10-yard line. Like, it was just outlier absurd, almost certain to regress there. He had 26 carries inside the 5-yard line, 10 more than anybody else in the entire league, which is just totally insane. Wow. And so you need a lot to break right to score 15 rushing touchdowns in a season, one of which is like guys getting pushed out of bounds at the one, having the ball a ton, not scoring a lot of long receiving touchdowns. And I think with Matt Ryan, they'll be more pass centric. And so I feel pretty good about that one too.
All right. In the passing game, you faded Aaron Rodgers as well, kind of the same type of idea. Under 33 and a half passing touchdowns. This one, a casual bettor, you can talk yourself into it when you look at, okay, Devontae Adams is gone. That takes away a huge chunk of production, particularly red zone production, away from Aaron Rodgers, and he has all these younger receivers around him now. How much of that was part of your cap on this one versus just projections of what will be missing with Adams?
I think people underrate wide receiver play when it comes to quarterback production. In other words, like Tom Brady, when in his last year in New England, he looked like he was done. Like he looked,
Yep.
and they had no one to throw to. Then he goes to Tampa. He has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and next thing you know, he's like the MVP of the league, or should have been the MVP of the league. I think it makes a big difference. I think what we've done with Green Bay is shifted their run pass rates way more towards the run, because I mean their two best players are running backs on offense besides Aaron Rodgers. I
Right.
mean, very clearly Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are their two best running backs. And one thing you saw, and you mentioned it with Devontae Adams, like when they got to the 1 yard line, that was often not a run, but a play to Devontae Adams, which like no one else in the
Yep.
league runs. Like no one else is like, oh, my goal line back is a pass to Devontae Adams. And so yeah, I think Green Bay's going to play slow. They're going to play more run heavy. They're going to be at the goal line way more run heavy than they've been in the past. And so, yeah, I feel pretty good about the Aaron Rodgers under 33.5 touchdowns.
I know the feeling. I had a couple of like AJ Dillon or Aaron Jones to score a touchdown props last year, and they would wind up with none, and Devontae Adams would wind up with 2 touchdown grabs inside the 5, and
Yeah.
I would be like, that's just not how you're supposed to draw it up. But you take the L and you move on. Um, a couple of overs, because I do find it interesting when you have overs and what went into them. Let's start. We're on quarterback right now, so we'll start with Daniel Jones, who you have over 20.5 passing touchdowns. Bet on DraftKings. Let me see where it's at right now. But the Giants are a team that I do like on the up this year. I bet them over 6.5 wins. It's sitting at 7 right now on DK Sportsbook. The coaching turnover, having capable coaches after what the Giants have had for such a long time, running the whatever it was, so that Joe Judge running whatever it was, so they had more room to punt, being the most notable of all plays. They have a good coaching staff, and I think the perception is that the Giants did very well with their 2 top 10 picks, getting solid offensive line help and Evan Neal from Alabama, and then getting Thibodeau, good edge rusher from Oregon. They improved the team with both. Um, Daniel Jones up to 21.5, so it moved a touchdown. What went into this cap? Do you still like it at 21.5? It's not that much of a difference. I guess it doesn't sound like.
We have 24.7 touchdowns for Daniel Jones, passing touchdowns for Daniel Jones this year, 24.7.
Okay.
You know, not all time props correlate to fantasy. In other words, like we could take, obviously I love Jonathan Taylor this year, but we have an under on him. Like that has nothing to do with fantasy. But I think
Right.
for fantasy, we're higher than market on all the Giants stuff. They're just going to be so much better with Brian Daboll there. And they get Kadarius Toney for a full season. And I think they know how to use Wendell Robinson. And so I think Kenny Galladay can have a good year too. And so they also have Barkley out of the backfield. Like, it's not just on Daniel Jones. He just needs to get these guys the ball. Whereas I think Davis Mills might be like better than Daniel Jones, but Davis Mills has like no one's going to do anything for him, after the
Yep.
catch or even before the catch to get open. And so, yeah, I think quarterback overs I'm more okay with because injury rates are so much less. So we don't have a huge gap here, 24.7, but I feel pretty good about projecting Daniel Jones to actually play 17 games, whereas at other positions, it's like it would be an upset if somebody played 17 games. So yeah, I try to be high on the Giant stuff in betting and in fantasy. It's getting harder. I think the bandwagon, much like the Lions, who I've had a ton of, but the bandwagon is getting a little bit more full on both those teams, but I think there's still some room there. And yeah, if you want to take Daniel Jones over 21.5 passing touchdowns, I'm fine with that. We have 24.7, like I said.
I meant to follow up on the Aaron Rodgers with something that you kind of said, and that being quarterback is a position that I kind of do look at props a little bit differently because they're not going to take the same wear and tear that the primary ball carriers are going to take. So the Jones play makes sense to me. Like I get why you're over there. So going back to Rodgers, does that make your cap on that purely because we're talking back to back MVP with uh, ever since he got that last injury that took him out a long period of games, he's kind of learned to protect himself like a Tom Brady, where either you have great offensive line play and when you don't, you know how to get rid of the ball so that you're not getting hit. Like these veteran quarterbacks, all-time quarterbacks know how to do that. So is your cap on Rodgers for 17 games and saying we're comfortable with that under no matter what?
Yeah, we have 31.7 passing
Okay.
TDs this year for Aaron Rodgers. So, not a huge under. And yeah, like you said, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is pretty likely to play every game this season. So again, I think the Aaron Rodgers thing was less about injury or anything like that and just more about a schematic stuff and how they're going to play this year. And I mean, let's be honest, at some point, like Brady and Rodgers and these guys, like their play is going to fall off. I don't know exactly when. And, obviously I've been wrong on Brady and Rodgers and plenty of guys before when it's like, oh, they can't keep doing this at age 40, age 39, age 43, and just
You and Max Kellerman.
yeah. I mean, at some point I'm going to be right though. I mean,
Yep.
it's hard, who knows exactly when, but like it wouldn't shock me if at some point Brady and Rodgers in the next 1 to 2 years, like you start to see the Drew Brees, the Ben Roethlisberger, the Peyton Manning type stuff where the arm strength really starts to go.
All right, two more player props I want to talk about, and then we'll close out with just a few minutes of week one type of stuff. The other over you bet, Darren Waller, over 800.5 receiving yards. The addition of Davante Adams is obviously going to take some volume, but at the same time, you make the argument that it just opens up so much more for Waller, who had so much concentration on him last season. Let me know what you're thinking here on Waller, because I agree the Raiders passing game, that's going to be an over team. That's going to be a team that eats up a lot of offense. And I think the attention to Davante Adams probably opens up more for Waller versus taking away from him with balls going to Adams.
Yeah. I mean, Waller is good, and Waller is good at earning targets and getting open. I don't think that Davante Adams is going to like totally crush him. We have Darren Waller for 984 receiving yards this year. We have Hunter Renfrow for 857 and Davante Adams for 1268. I think it's going to be concentrated among those three guys. And we kind of saw that last year with the Bengals. Like, people are saying, how can Joe Burrow support T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd? Well, when you don't throw to the tight end, you don't throw to the running back, it gets really concentrated on those three guys. And I think we could see that with the Raiders. I don't expect them to throw to running back a ton, and I don't expect them to throw to wide receiver 3 a ton. And so if you're only throwing to three guys, really, I think all three have a chance to get there. And so, yeah, Waller's another one, like keep him honest. I think that's probably one of our lower edge bets that we have, but I thought it was good enough to bet and hopefully scare them into not going too low on some of these lines.
All right. Last one. You were in Philly forever. I've seen you, retweet some reports about what this Eagles backfield is going to look like. You took the Miles Sanders under 5.5 rushing touchdowns. Just talk to me overall about this Eagles backfield, because it's a team that's getting a lot of hype this year and people are high on. I don't know if I buy it or not. I kind of just don't have an opinion on the Eagles. I think that the Giants over 6.5 wins is my NFC East take, and I don't really have much else other than Carson Wentz isn't going to work in Washington or anywhere. But talk to me about the Eagles backfield, because I think there's going to be a lot of guys involved as it pertains to props and fantasy.
Yeah. We have Miles Sanders for 4.65 rushing touchdowns. And part of that is that we have Jalen Hurts projected for 6.99 rushing touchdowns, right? And so you get into a spot where around the goal line, like Jalen Hurts is going to run. Like they're going to run some RPO stuff. They're going to run some straight scrambles for Jalen Hurts around the goal line for sure. I thought Miles Sanders got a bit unlucky last year with his touchdown rate. Like obviously he's not going to score 0 again, but I do think they like Kenny Gainwell more than probably people realize. And I still think they're willing to give carries to Boston Scott as well. And so, I think Miles Sanders is the starter, but Kenny Gainwell is going to play a lot. And Boston Scott might play some also. And Jalen Hurts is going to steal some as well. And so, on a lot of these running back touchdown and running back rush yard stuff, you could like blindly bet the unders on a lot of them and probably make money. Maybe probably not a lot, but you can make like a little bit of money just blindly betting every under. The Miles Sanders touchdown one, touchdowns. I don't love betting touchdown stuff because like it can be so
You
random,
can
you know.
sneak up on 6 touchdowns somehow more than you can the yards are more of a representation of the
Exactly.
volume, I guess. That makes sense.
Exactly. So yeah, the touchdown stuff I don't feel as good about betting, but you know, they're fun ones for
Well,
sure.
so all right, now it creates another question. What goes into betting touchdowns versus yards for you? Is it just projections if you feel you have a larger percentage gap in your projections on it?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking to make bets, you know. We're not looking to shy away, and so we're looking at all the markets, you know. So yeah, if we show a big enough projection, and I mean, you know, Miles Sanders has to score 6 touchdowns for us to lose this bet. We have him for 4.65, and that's with a full season of health. Like, we're not going to pass on that, you know. Um, but generally speaking, I agree with you that we do better with the yardage stuff. And by the way, one other one you mentioned before on ETN, you know, when you the rush versus receiving stuff. So I was betting a bunch of unders in season on rush and receiving, and like we started doing the math on it, and there's just so much more volatility when you combine rush and receiving than just one of them. In other words, like a guy could get stuffed, obviously rushing, and he could break a 60-yard run. It's really hard for us. I don't, and what I'm trying to say is just straight adding our projection for rushing plus receiving is not the right way to do it for betting props in rush plus receiving because the volatility is just like ramped up to the max when you start adding in total yards instead of just rushing and receiving. So I just wanted to add that on those because, you know, I've taken unders and, you know, I was taking a bunch of DeAndre Swift unders and Eckler unders on rush plus receiving last year and losing a bunch of them. And I was like, well, there he goes again, another 60-yard reception, you know, to screw me. And it was like, we just weren't baking in enough volatility on when you add those two together. So I just wanted to put that out there.
No, that makes sense. The running back, whatever, you're down 15 in the fourth quarter and you start checking down to the running back and they start to add up. So that makes sense. Let me close out with this in the betting space before we just do close up with a couple of minutes of that week 1 slate. Anything outside of the player prop market, I just want to give you the floor NFL wise. Any takes, whether it be a division or a team that you're really high or low on, or a week 1 spot that you think has some value that hasn't been incorporated yet. Whatever you want. I'm giving you the floor for an NFL take of yours.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest take was that the Lions like have a chance to be really good this year. You can make case the Lions have the best offensive line in the entire NFL, and I think by adding DJ Chark and Jameson Williams when he gets back, and having DeAndre Swift healthy and Hawkinson healthy, like, I mean, they're pretty good. And like if they can figure it out on defense, which I don't know if they can, like I think they're pretty likely to win 7, 8, 9 games. And to me, like that, if they can just win 9 or 10 games and maybe make the playoffs, like to me, that puts Dan Campbell right in the mix for coach of the year. So probably my favorite bet that I have, I somehow got a 60-1 on Dan Campbell to be coach of the year. And like, I don't even think they have to do that much above their expectation for him to win it. They probably just need to make the playoffs. And so I had some Lions to make the playoffs at, plus 480 or so. I'm not sure what that's at. Now I have like plus 1400
right
on them
around
to win the
there.
division. All that kind of Lions stuff I have is probably my favorite stuff that I have so far.
I've heard that from multiple sharp people that like the Lions this year. I was one of the guys that was on the Lions under last year, and I won, but I didn't feel great about it because they were in every game and they could have been a 500 team. If that's how I know, because I was on the Lions under. If you weren't watching, you don't necessarily know. You just saw that the record was bad. And I see them losing on the Justin Tucker kick that bounces over the uprights, and I see them tying in Pittsburgh, and all these games that came right down to it that they could have won, but just had awful luck, inexperience, poor decision making that they can clean up, and they've gotten better over the offseason. So I agree, and I'm not necessarily as high. Like the Packers are a good team; they should make the playoffs, but they've probably got to come down. The Vikings are nothing special. The Bears, I think, can be in the mix for the worst team in the NFL, which says a lot. So I'm with you. The Lions can have a pretty good season there in the NFC North.
Yeah.
Um,
One that I
Go
almost
ahead.
bet a couple days ago was CeeDee Lamb to lead the NFL in receptions. It was 22-1. Now it's 15-1. I definitely wouldn't take 15-1, but I was I didn't pull the trigger on it. Now it's gone. But I do think CeeDee Lamb has like a very legit chance to catch 100 balls the way it's shaping up. And then once you get into that
I'm
range,
I meant to touch on him during the player prop section, and I saw that you didn't have anything on him, and I was going to guess that if you had some overs sprinkled in, that there might be some CD Lamb there. Um, his receiving yards are 1775. His touchdowns are 7.5. His receptions are 90.5. He's getting. I saw that he got like a little over 25%, I think, of the targets recently from Prescott in a scrimmage.
Yeah.
Um, if I'm gonna play, I haven't played any overs yet. If I play an over, I might play that over on 90.5 CD Lamb receptions, because if he doesn't get hurt, he's just going to be a huge part of that offense. And you have to remember how many pieces Dallas lost in Cooper, even Cedric Wilson. So much of the volume isn't there, and Lamb is such a possession guy that can just get so many receptions.
Yeah, we have 89.2 right now on CD
Ooh,
Lamb, but I think
right on the
we
nose.
are conservative on target share. We try not to like go too nuts because we already have CD Lamb as like a really good early second round pick. Like, I don't want to put CD Lamb at 30% target share because that's like so outlier. So we only have 23% target share for CD Lamb right now. If you were to give him 25 or 26%, he would start pushing towards that 100 catch projection for us. And I honestly like, I think it's pretty likely that he gets to 25 plus. Like the Dallas would be doing it wrong if he doesn't get to 25 plus. But again, we only have 23%, and that gives him 89 catches right now for us.
Okay. Well, if I do bet an over in the player prop market, it's going to be CD Lamb over 90.5. I've been staring at it, and I don't think I need to rush to do anything. I'll just keep thinking about it, and we'll see if we get around to it. All right, let's close out with 5 minutes or so of the DFS stuff here. The week one salaries dropped on Friday, the whatever that was, the last Friday in July. I'll say it that way because I don't remember the date.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the first week in August here. The week one slate is out. We'll just do like a minute or so on each position here or something. Starting at quarterback, I assume you've combed through it all. What jumped out to you there? I saw, to just quickly, I think that there's going to be a lot of points in Chargers and Raiders. So Herbert and Carr jumped out to me, and then going cheaper down. I know he's coming off the ACL. Um, Jameis Winston, where is he? 5,300 in Atlanta. Atlanta is just miserable. So those are some of the guys that jumped out to me.
Yeah, I actually haven't taken too hard of a look at this stuff yet, just because we're still obviously in the midst of all our season long stuff and nothing is pressing
Nope,
on.
you got to lock in your lineups today, and you can't change them.
Yeah. The thing that jumped up to me is it was so insulting to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is cheaper than Zach Wilson, Jacoby Brissett, Colt McCoy, Sam Darnold, Davis Mills. So Daniel Jones is going to give you, I think, a rushing floor combined with a pretty reasonable ceiling, like I already talked about for him in the past game. So Daniel Jones at 5K. The thing about this slate is that, I mean, from what I can tell already, like there are some gross mispricings, and so it's gonna be a really loose slate. So I don't know that a 5K Daniel Jones is needed in kind of
Right.
optimal builds, but yeah, I mean, I think that one stuck out to me at quarterback for sure.
Running back is the position that I probably had the most trouble identifying value, but it's also the position where we're just by nature of the sport probably going to get the most training camp injuries, the most preseason injuries, and there's going to be a guy that's $4,000 that jumps out as a cash game chalk. We just don't know who it is yet as we record this. So we know that, but based on where things are at right now, I had a little bit of trouble finding too much value here, but you want to let me know any guys that jumped out to you at running back?
Well, yeah, I would say value doesn't always have to be cheap. And we haven't done any week one
Yep.
projections yet, but I'm pretty sure that Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey are going to rate as like some of the best values on the whole slate, even though they're expensive. Because to me, Christian McCaffrey should cost 9,800, 10K, and Jonathan Taylor should probably cost that much as well. And so, like, for them to be at 8,500 and 9,100, like that's what stuck out to me at running back was like, I'm going to have plenty of money because I can save everywhere. And then two of the best plays are going to be McCaffrey and JT, I think. And obviously, everybody knows DraftKings is full PPR, and so I mean to have McCaffrey at 8,500, like again, you don't have to be cheap to be really good value. I also love the Saquon. Like they have Saquon. Real, I mean, Saquon's cheaper than Josh Jacobs, which like I just I mean, it's just insane. And so Saquon 6-1. It seems like something messed up with the algorithm and the Giants because like Kadarius Toney is also
Well, it's yeah,
4,100.
I don't know if it's the algorithm or just the way that they're being projected, because I like them over on the win total. I bet it at 6.5. It went to 7 on DraftKings. I think they're a good bet. They're getting almost a touchdown in Tennessee, who's not particularly good on defense and lost a lot on offense. Derrick Henry might steamroll them and win that game, but getting 7 points in week 1, I just think everything's down on the Giants, and
Yeah.
that carries over from the sportsbook side of things to the fantasy side of
Yeah,
things.
but I mean, Saquon goes in the second round like almost every time now, right? And so like for him to be at
Right. So then why
6,100
is he
is
so
really
much
cheap.
cheaper than all the guys being drafted around him
Yeah.
on a week 1 slate? Um, where's this thing that I had on Jonathan Taylor? I'm with you on Jonathan Taylor. That's the one guy that I wrote up in my article, and that's, if we have our Jameis Winstons, our Daniel Joneses, maybe that's where they do come into play, because Jonathan Taylor steamrolled the Texans both times last year for like something like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns per game. So I think he's just the guy. I think that I predict that you're going to get off to a rocky start to your touchdown under on Jonathan Taylor. I don't think he'll get over 14.5 in week 1, but I think he's going to get a couple, and you should be fine from there. But yeah, he's the guy matchup wise that you just feed in week 1, and I'm willing to spend up on him. All right, minute each, and we'll get you out of here. Wide receiver. Justin Jefferson against Green Bay. He's 7,800. He had a really good game at home against the Packers last year, $150 or something with a couple touchdowns. There's some value opening up lower down the board. I think a lot of I already said how I like the Saints in Atlanta. I think they have a deep wide receiver core with a lot of cheap guys. Anything at wide receiver that you want to speak on?
Yeah, I mean, the Pittman one, I mean, I think Pittman is okay, but I'm not like screaming to draft him in the third round where he's been going. But to have him at 5,500 is
Cheap.
just outrageous against Houston. And so I think a lot of teams are going to start with JT and Pittman come week 1. And then the other guy that I'm high on this year that is not really reflected in the market, certainly not as high as Michael Pittman, but Juju Smith-Schuster at 5,200. When you get full PPR DraftKings, you're playing with Patrick Mahomes, you're playing in Arizona, like Juju is going to be the slot guy for Patrick Mahomes, who loves
Yep.
to throw at his slot receiver. It's going to be really hard, I think, for Juju to fail at 5,200 there. He's going to catch, 4 or 5 balls, and I think it'll be really hard for him to fail at 5,200. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about when like I say like it's really loose. I mean, there's going to be, Chase Claypool is 5K. I mean, there's going to be Tony is 4,100. I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff to do. With the salary so loose in week 1.
Yeah, I wrote my immediate reactions article on Friday when all these came out, and Jonathan Taylor's the guy on the Colts. I'm gonna play him in cash, but I think as a tournament pivot, doing like a Matt Ryan and Pittman stack, it costs you like whatever it is, $1,500 or so dollars more for the combo if things wind up going that way. In Houston, I definitely agree there. Tight end, the guy that jumped out to me, I'll give you 2 names, but the guy that jumped out to me immediately, the guy that you bet the yardage over on, that would be Darren Waller. You see all the elite tight ends on the board and what they're priced at. Mark Andrews is the highest at 6,800. Kelsey's right behind him at 66. Waller's down at 54, and in a good matchup against the Chargers, or what has been a good matchup in the past, and should be in line for a pretty big season. So he was the guy at 5,400 that jumped out to me in a game that I think will be high scoring. And then I don't want to talk about too many Colts because how can they all do well? But Mo Alley Cox, former VCU hoops legend, I watched this guy grab 1,000,000 rebounds against my Rhode Island Rams plenty of times in the Atlantic 10. He's only 3,400, and he's finally the starter for the Colts. He's always had a guy in front of him and been like plug and play in certain weeks, and he's going to be the guy. I think he has the potential for a big week at 3,400, and I think he's going to have a pretty good season. You're going to see that price tag come up.
Yeah. I think in tournaments, playing one of these more expensive tight ends who is still underpriced. To me, Travis Kelce is like a 72 or 7,300 player. He's 6,600. You're not saving like huge amounts there, but I do think Pitts,
But
Waller.
it's what you can do with it to save.
Right.
and it's the only position you can do it at.
Yeah, nobody jumped out to me as like super cheap. I thought the best of the cheap guys was Irv Smith, but now he broke his thumb and he had surgery, and that's going to be looking kind of thin. The punts right now that just from glancing at it would be Brevin Jordan at 3,100 and John Bates at 3,100, assuming Logan Thomas is out. But, obviously the ceiling on those guys is really, really capped. And so would prefer them in more cash game settings. And I think you're going to have enough money to pay up at tight end if you want to.
Guys probably thought I was going to skip defense. I'm not going to skip defense. Your Detroit Lions are only $2,000 at home. They are the only minimum team on DraftKings. I assume that means there's a 100% chance that you are locking them into all your lineups.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are going to project as so run heavy that we probably won't have a great projection on the Lions. Like, obviously, when you play a defense on DraftKings, you want the opponent to be passing a lot so you can create strip sacks and pick sixes. And so I bet we won't have a great projection on Lions, but it'll be fine for cash for sure. I don't think the Bears are crazy in at home against Trey Lance at 2,200. Giants defense against Tannehill. Obviously, that's another team that wants to run a lot, but if you think the Giants can get a lead. Yep. And so, yeah, I always try to save at defense. I kind of wish that they had lowered kind of the salary range because it's really hard to play like these 4K defenses and have it be optimal, like no matter how good of a play they are. Like obviously the 49ers against Justin Fields is a great play. They need like literally like 15 to 20 points for it to be a good play at 4,100. And that's asking so much out of your defense.
All right, that is DFS talk for the week 1 slate. That is sportsbook talk for NFL futures, for NFL player props. Adam Levitan from Establish the Run. Thank you so much for giving us some time this summer to go over some football.
All right, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
For sure. All right, for Julian Edlow, thank you guys for listening to Unreasonable Odds presented by DraftKings. We will be back with some more August episodes, previewing football. Eventually, we'll get some MLB in with Steve Buchanan if he ever wants to return to the show. It's been months now. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back with some more football soon.